stream. Bear with me a sec.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Haley.
Morning.
Okay, Roger, that's fine. You can begin.
Oh, hi, Tanya. Morning, my name's Roger Boone. I'm the chair of Conwy Sacre. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is a virtual meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and the recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and for attendees to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function. And attendees are required to leave their camera on at all times. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, please put a message in the chat function so the Democratic Service Officer is aware and then let us know when you return. And just a very brief moment for silent reflection. Let's just think about children and the teachers and all involved in education in our authority. This has been a time of great challenge for so many people. So let's just for a moment just think about them and the work that they do on behalf of the families in our authority. And I would like to, we've got a heck of a lot to get through today. So if I'm a bit brusque, please excuse me as we move through the agenda. Any apologies for absence, Sally?
Yeah, we've had apologies from Neil Hawkins, the humanist rep, Carl Lawson, secondary rep, and Janine Tennant-Jones, the special school rep. And just to say, Roger, as well, if Hugh doesn't arrive, if we give him about 20 minutes or so, are we okay to release the translators?
Yes, he asked me to pull up an item on the agenda, which I'll refer to in a second because
So
he will have to leave early.
So if we leave it about 20 minutes or so, if he doesn't turn up, then we will release the translators. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Fine. Well, the first thing, declarations of interest, actually. A couple of things I just want to mention here. I'm going to be leaving the area. My family wants to, my wife wants to go down to rejoin our family. And I don't know when that's going to happen. Our house is up for sale at the moment. But given the nature of my home, it could take 2 weeks or 2 years. There's just not knowing on this. But I therefore have started to think about planning for succession. And I've actually already asked Sam, as our vice chair, if he would actually be willing to take on the chairmanship at a point in the future. And we had a meeting very recently, which was very helpful. And Sam's agreed to do that. So there will come a point where we will propose formally that Sam be the new chair. In the meantime, the intention is that Phil and I will draw him into all the preparation and planning for meetings and looking at the management plan and how it's being taken forward, so that by the time he gets to that point, he will be really well briefed. And thanks, Sam, anyway, for agreeing to pick up that at some point. Also, on a declaration of interest today, collective worship is on the agenda. And as many of you will know, Phil actually has a small business now in establishing materials for collective worship for use in the primary sector. So we are just noting that declaration of interest at this point. On urgent matters, the item on membership and representation on Conwy Sacre, I'm bringing forward to after item 7 at the request of Hugh, who won't be here at the end of the meeting. Okay, so we move on to minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy that they are a correct record and can be accepted? Can I take that from the
proposer and a seconder?
Well, proposer.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sanjay. Seconder, Colette. Thank you. Faith reps. In favour? Thank you. Councillors in favour? And yeah. And teachers. Sorry, Hayley. lost you there for a second. Yeah. Okay, so that's agreed, so we can move forward on that. Okay, so matters arising. The pupil referral unit representation, Phil, updates on them.
Yeah, I know the EIT, we haven't got a PRU member on the constitution, so therefore.
Phil, you're coming through very quiet. Is he coming through quiet for everybody else? Yes.
Yeah, I'm using Roger's microphone because otherwise we end up.
It's quite difficult to hear you.
Yeah, I'll speak up. So I met with the EIT with Claire Rowlands, and it was said that that because we've not got Claire, sorry, because we've not got a PRU representative on the constitution, then we wouldn't then be able to sort of bring on board a PRU rep unless it becomes constitutional item.
So there's a point here, isn't there, Phil, that as we revise the constitution, as we are going to do, that's the point where we could actually bring that back on the table. Yeah, right. Okay. The question here, there is good news that after my meeting with the secondary heads, there's been quite a good response, hasn't there? What's the update for?
So as a result of meeting with the head teachers, primary and secondary, we've got 2/3, probably over 2/3 of the questionnaire participants from schools across Conwy completed. So that was
okay. Initial teacher training.
We have good links with Bangor University. We're establishing some good links with a couple of the PGCE's tutors and the School of Education anyway. So we should be able to have a presentation on initial teacher training from Bangor University in the autumn term, or whenever we want that to take place.
So that's some really good professional support going to be available there.
Can I come in there, Roger?
Yes, Hugh?
Regarding initial teacher training, Vaughan Salisbury was responsible through the Presbyterian Church for aspects of Sacre. Sent a letter to Anani and what's her name? Sorry, Lynn Eagle, stating the worries regarding ITT in Wales, and knowing that a bursary for our e-teachers of 10,000 is given in England, but not in Wales. And the danger that some people from Wales will probably now go to be taught for RE in England, and that could cause problems for Wales. Now, I understand that Bangor University did provide a paper on training to the Welsh Government recently. I have sent to the Bangor University for a copy of that report, but I did not get any answer. I don't know if any of you have any information regarding that. Really, the answer came from the Welsh Government, was a civil service response, really, that RE was just one of many subjects in question. But I think they were quite wrong in that respect, but because RE is has got more of a statutory status than any other subject, in fact, in the new curriculum at the moment. So I don't know what is happening there at the moment, but I think we need to continue to push for ITT and maybe get more of an answer from Bangor University in the report from them as well, of exactly what was the government response to their report.
Well, taking on board what you've just said, Hugh, I think perhaps if we could follow that through and actually put it on the agenda for the next meeting to see what kind of response that hopefully we've got by that stage.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, if we could do that. And think it's right, Phil.
Yes. So Tanya's smiling at this one. NAPFRE and WASAC have met with Kevin Palmer on this issue about initial teacher training and about numbers coming through to those courses. And it's part of a much bigger picture and a much bigger issue. In terms of the quota, most of the ITE providers are getting the numbers that they're allocated for their courses, not quite as many as there are allocated places, but not far off. It's a little bit further along the line when teachers are moving into schools and the positions that are available in schools that then becomes a bit of a problem because of the nature of Key Stage 4 and the way that schools are using, non-specialists to teach at Key Stage 4 and at Key Stage 3. The numbers then going into school and not then requiring the number of schools or PGC or ITE positions for them to move on. So there's a big, Kevin Palmer's promised to look into supporting teachers in all aspects of the RVE journey. I can't remember, Tanya, can you remember the name that he used for it? I think it wasn't pathways, but he used a particular pipelines, I think he called it. They were looking at the different pipelines from RVE, right from primary into secondary into A-level, and then A-level into degree, and then moving into ITE positions from the need to do that and the encouragement to do that from a learner's point of view, but also from a school's point of view to ensure that these jobs are available once they leave the ITE sector. Tanya's got a hand, so I think she was at the meeting as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya.
Sorry, I can't find the hand function for some reason. Can I just say, absolutely right, Phil, what you've just said, it shows the complexity of it. I think we recognise it's not just a question of a bursary of £10,000 or not. And I think there is there are real issues with actually having that money available to do that anyway in Wales. But it's more about what will work and what won't be. So there is, as Phil pointed out, we've got WASACA and NAPFRI colleagues meeting with Kevin Palmer from the Welsh Government, and we're actually exploring the complexity of it and exploring a number of avenues that we can actually contribute to working with him and his colleagues. So things are happening, and more will be available in what's being taken forward in the autumn term, which we can share better then.
Well, that'd be really helpful, Tanya. And obviously, there is the prospects of some progress there, which is really encouraging. And it's particularly good to have that link with Bangor now established as well. Well, thank you for that. Are you happy with that, Hugh?
Yes, maybe Tanya can help. Is the report that was produced for the Welsh Government available, Tanya?
I think my understanding is that it's available on request. It is available on request, and I understand you've requested it.
Yes, yeah.
And you haven't had a response. Other than that, I don't want to say much else about the report.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Tanya.
Okay, so we'll move on then. Monitoring time allocation in secondary religious education, which I know has been a particular important issue for all of us, naturally. I think, Phil, you've had feedback from all but 2 schools?
All but 1 school.
All now, 1 now, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
So as a result of our last meeting, I think Carl suggested getting the heads of department together to discuss the future of the GCSE and the qualifications of Key Stage 4, Year 10 and 11. We did that, and as a result, I asked each of the heads of department what they're doing at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, sorry, 7 to 9 and 10 to 11 in the new curriculum. And I'm going to present that as part of the questionnaire results a little bit later, because I've embedded that into time allocation at Key Stage 4.
Oh, right. Okay. So we'll take a look at that later, and maybe possibly have a really good look at it in the autumn term. Okay, great. Raising head teacher awareness. I had a meeting with the secondary heads primary group, and I had a response eventually from their leader, Matthew Jones, who had gone through a great deal of trouble to actually publicise what SACRE were doing. I was really disappointed, in fact, that when I went to that meeting, that so many of them had no idea at all about what SACRE did. So that was a bit of a shock for me. But he's followed that through, and as a result of that, we've had this very good feedback as well. But there is a whole issue there of raising head teacher awareness. And do you want to say anything at this point, Larry, on that one, or do you want to leave it till later?
No, I mean I can come in there. I think we're going to go back to them in terms of the strategic forums, and Matthew it will be our chair as well from September onwards. So I think Roger, we just have to revisit that again in the autumn term with them.
Right, okay. Right, the future religious studies examinations, Phil.
So I met with the heads of department to discuss this. The current offer ends in 2025. There'll be a new GCSE for first teaching then, as our current year 9s then enter into year 10. At that point, the Agorid will no longer be a viable qualification, neither will the ethics and diversity paper that's currently been made available. But there is some positive movement on what's called the skills suite within the GCSE or the Key Stage 4 offer within the qualifications from WJC and from Qualifications Wales. All we know is that there were 3 units that were promised. These 3 units are now going to become 6 units, and they will have a religion, values and ethics flavour to them. So a school can offer those as part of a bigger suite of qualifications, and they can offer the GCSE full course. The short course is disappearing. That's about as much as we know at the moment. They will be publishing, hopefully very soon, an overview of what the specification will look like for the GCSE, but we think that they haven't really started thinking about the skills qualifications, these 6 units. That will go out for consultation and tender, I think. And now, according to sort of our sources within the NAPFRE, we're hoping that people like Agorid will bid for those and then provide units that are very similar to what we've got for the Agorid units, but for the skills suite. So that's as much as we know at the moment about post-6 or about qualifications for the RS and RBU.
So is there any insight into what will be provided at GCSE for the lower ability range?
Yes, that will be these sort of 6 modules on the skills suite, but they're going to be tied into the RBE, our agreed syllabus and the RBE guidance. But we don't know much more about that.
Well, we'll need to look at the contents of that fairly closely, won't we, when the time comes?
Yes, yeah. For first teaching are they going to be first teaching in 2026, Tanya? Did you? I can't remember. I know that the first teaching for GCSE will be when the current year 8 will be moving into year 10, so that's 2025. So we're looking at specifications published in September to look at. But in terms of the skills suite, I seem to think that's a year later, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to, being recorded, I would not like to give a definitive answer before actually checking my facts. Sorry. Okay.
There sounds to be a lot of sensitive issues here, Tanya. They really do. Okay, we'll move on then. And with the notes, we'll need to keep an eye on that one in particular. Links with the Global South. This was the proposal that was coming from Robin Miller, MP, and I'd provided a paper for him with regard to that, how it could be developed within the authority. Sadly, not well. Robin, in fact, is, as you know, is no longer our MP. So sadly, that particular initiative, I think, is going to die at this stage. And I certainly won't be around anyway to pick it up as a fresh thing with a new member of Parliament. So that will go, unfortunately. Briefly on communication with schools, Phil.
We were discussing why we'd included this as an agenda item about 20 minutes ago. We think that just to re-emphasise the communication links that we've got with schools, with the Conwy Head Teachers Bulletin, the Education Bulletin, the newsletter, and then through the representatives that we've got, please feed back to your sort of representative bodies the information that you get from SACRE, and then we can feed our information to schools using communication channels that we've got.
Yeah, thanks. And the questionnaire went out to the youth forum, didn't it? The next item, yeah. Bill, and they're going to be hopefully adopting it.
Yeah.
And so how far we got?
So I used a questionnaire from the RE Quality Mark, which is quite a useful questionnaire to gain pupil insight into the quality of British education and RVE within schools. We're using that as the basis, and I've sent that to the Youth Forum to have a look at to see if they want to amend or put any of their own questions. Once they've gone through that, they will be recommending to schools that this could be completed. We'll put together an online forum for that. And then once the data's in for that, the Youth Forum will analyse that data along with myself and make any recommendations for schools or recommendations for us about promoting RVE.
Any thoughts? I know this is something you're very keen on, Laura. Any thoughts on what the next step beyond that will be? Did you pick me up, Larry?
No, sorry, Roger. Can you repeat that, please? Sorry.
Yeah. You have a particular interest in this initiative, and I was wondering what you thought when all that data had been gathered and analysed, what the next step forward might be.
I think in terms of conversations Phil will have with the Education Improvement Service, Phil, I think that we need to plan with that team in terms of utilising that data and thinking how we move forward with it. I know that Phil will be attending again in the autumn term, Roger.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for that. All right. We had that request from the Jewish community about the Holocaust materials and so forth. But we were very keen last time that we established if anything was going to go out, it was in a wider context in relationship to the whole situation. And you were asked, Phil, to provide some package for circulation.
The package, I've not been able to complete the package, but schools have been aware of the Holocaust materials. But we will be bringing it later. We're making good links with a couple of lecturers from Bangor University, and one of them is on the board of the Holocaust Educational. I don't know the full title of the organisation, but with the links that we're making with Bangor University and the guys there, I really hope that we'll be able to promote materials much further ahead than we have done previously, or we've not done previously. But I was wondering whether, in terms of the Holocaust Memorial Day, we can get ahead of ourselves and make sure that one, it's in the diary, and also that we can ensure that we publicise the materials that are coming through from this organisation and other organisations across Wales, because I think they're doing some really some good stuff. And they've been doing stuff where they've been getting Holocaust survivors and then schools together to do online seminars and online training and all sorts of stuff. So I think we can utilise that moving forward much more than we've ever done before.
That would be really good. And we have, of course, Holocaust Memorial Day in Llandud now, and it would be good. And we've had survivors there, and in fact, they've gone out to some of the schools. So to tighten that link will be a useful way forward as well. Sam.
Yeah, we had the organisation on Memorial Day come into our school. If I could just sort of add a little line of caution that it was a little bit politically charged, and in the current context, the current global situation, I did actually have to ask the keynote speaker to just revise their speech slightly. So I just want to throw that out there, and I think in any other years it would perhaps not be as sensitive, but at the moment it's an incredibly sensitive issue, and I think we just have to tread cautiously with that.
Yeah, I take note of that as well, Sam. That I'm well aware that the person who is involved, who I know very well, who is involved in promoting all of this, has a very, very strong political stance on the issues rather than coming at it from a church. And as educationists, that's something we have to be very aware of. So thanks for that reminder. Thank you. Okay, we have the training video for new members. I don't think we've got any new members here. Angie, have you seen the training video and in your time from here?
I'm not sure I have, to be honest, Roger.
Oh, right. Okay. So
yeah,
we'll send it out again then. But over to you, Phil.
Yeah, just to say that we recorded the SACRE member training events, and that has been sent out, a link to that, and it will be sent out again. So you can watch that in your own time. It's got a really useful link to a document on WASACRE about joining joining SACRE and the role of SACREs and what SACREs do. So it's basically a training package around that document and what we can provide as SACRE.
Yeah, appreciate if you could send it again. I may well have watched it, but I've done that so much training that it all overlaps in the end.
I see that Jacob's joined us, so it would be a very useful thing for Jacob to have actually to get him on board and up to date. So we'll send that to you as well, Jacob. Okay.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, sorry, I've had an awful time trying to log on with my internet. I'm sorry. I'm here now, which is good.
Okay, so we'll make sure that training video on SACRE and how it works and so forth gets through to you, so you'll be really well prepared for your next meeting as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Right. Well, I think we've been waiting for 2 years the analysis of the questionnaires we sent out, and yeah, I mean, to be very fair as well, as Larry, well, I think all of us know, the schools have been under enormous pressure, both with COVID and with the implementation of the new national curriculum, and also the ongoing impacts of COVID in terms of the way that's affected attendance and attitudes to school in the primary sector. I've heard from many primary school colleagues. So it's good that we've got all this together now anyway.
All right, I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see a slide that says Conwy SACRE School Questionnaire? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so we sent the questionnaire out probably about 18 months ago to schools. We didn't get a particularly positive response in terms of numbers very quickly. And then over the course of the last 12 months, I think we had 6 responses, and it sort of settled at 6 for quite a long time. And then we went up to about 24 because the teacher network was pushing it. And then as a result of meeting with the primary heads fed, we've got another sort of 16 or so through. Yeah. So we've got a total of 40 responses. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that it's 40 out of potential 63 responses, so just under 2/3. We've had 3 secondary schools, the special school in Conwy, and then 46 of the 51 primary schools have responded. That is the response rate. So I think in terms of statistically viable, we can sort of assume that this would be representative of the local authority as a whole overall. So the next slide, that was the first question, was which one you belong to. What I've done is I've grouped questions 2, 3, 4, and 5 because they're all to do with the new curriculum, the curriculum for Wales. And then we were asking about how familiar schools were with the things like the 4 purposes, question 2, things like the statements of what matters, question 3, progression steps. And then finally, question 5, we asked about the religion, values, and ethics, which will be our agreed syllabus. You'll notice that schools are decreasingly aware of these things. The 4 purposes they're very aware of, so over half of them, so 100% were familiar, sort of 5 and above, not 6 and above. We've got a good number at 10, 9, and 8 there. The 7 and above, when we asked about how familiar, 97.5% of schools said that they were, 7 and above on a scale of 1 to 10. That decreased to 97.5% for over half, which is still really positive, and 68.5% consider themselves in the top, sort of what 2/3, 3/4, in terms of how familiar they felt with the statements of what matters. That decreased, that's increased with progression steps. They felt more familiar with the progression steps related to humanities. Again, 97% sort of said, yeah, they were familiar, over half, 5, 4, 5 or above. And for 7 and above, they said 77.5%. And how confident were they about religion, values, and ethics? Again, for 5 and above, over half of them, they felt that they were, reasonably familiar with religion, values, and ethics. But in terms of like really confident, there was only 60% that would have said 7 and above. But on the whole, more positive than we could have expected. Remember, we're not early days in the new curriculum. It is the second year that it's been rolled out, but schools are still getting their heads around it and implementing changes. Regarding the agreed syllabus directly, 90% are sort of 5 and above, but confidence is down to about 55.5%. So just over half of them are confident that they're aware of the expectations of the agreed syllabus, but you know, sort of 90% would say that they're generally familiar. The lenses, so we broke down the agreed syllabus into things like the lenses, and we said, are you aware of the lenses? And this is where there's a sort of a more of a drop off. 72.5% said, yeah, they're aware of, are confident or familiar that the lenses exist. But in terms of confidence, it drops down to about 30%. For the work of SACPRAE, 20% are confident that they know what we do as a SACPRAE, but again, 67.5% were sort of familiar with what we do and how we go about our business. In terms of the curriculum time devoted to the teaching of RVE, remember the numbers that we got is quite high in terms of primary schools. 62.5% of the schools said so 25 out of the 41 schools or 40 schools said that they are meeting the requirements of about an hour a week. Again, requirements, it's a bit of a loose term now because there isn't anywhere in law or in our agreed syllabus that says a particular time allocation. So it's interpreted by the school. 13 of those schools, so 32.5%, said that using more than 1 hour a week. And only 2 schools said that they were using less than an hour a week for their religion, value and ethics. So again, I think that's relatively positive, but I suppose in my experience, I would say that primary schools, it's always buoyant, it's always around the hour a week, generally. And then for secondary, it's the key stage 4, it's the year 10 and 11 that becomes the issue. Year 7, 8 and 9, it's often an hour, but it's the key stage 4, it's the years 10 and 11 where there might be an option group, and then for the other schools, the other pupils, there might be something from form or which is not there. That's come out in our key stage 4 analysis, our secondary school analysis. So 6 of the 7 high schools responded. I didn't want to publish their names yet because it was the secondary heads of department that had given me this information rather than the heads. And so I want to go back to the schools individually to sort of let them know that we've been given this information before we then formally request or advise anything. So one school's got 4 hours of humanities in year 7 and 8. They've got an hour of RVE in year 9. They've got an hour for everybody in year 10 for the short course, and nothing currently in year 11. But again, I want to confirm, because that's an RE official sort of lesson, that the RVE or the RE might be provided through term drop-down days or through other things as well. So I want to go back to the school and confirm that. The second schools, they've got 1 50-minute lesson in year 7, 2 50 minutes in year 8, and a 50-minute lesson in year 9. So if you've got a 6-period day, a period would be 50 minutes, and one of those, obviously, year 7 and year 9 is dedicated to the RVE or RE on 2 of those in year 8. But they've got no provision specifically for year 10 and 11. Again, that would be lessons. I want to go and approach the school to find out about what they're offering in terms of maybe drop-down days or other pathways for looking at RVE. Third school is an hour for every year group. The fourth school is an hour for year 7 and 8. They start their year 9 options in year 9, GCSE in year 9, and so there are option classes with about, I think there's 2 to 3 classes in each of the year groups. But again, it's for sort of probably 50% of the school, they're not receiving a form of RVE lesson or an RE lesson. The 4th, 5th school, they've got 4 hours of humanities, so that's shared between geography, history, RVE, social studies, and business studies. They've got two 50-minute lessons in year 8, two 50-minute lessons in year 9, and then everybody does GCSE. And then for the final school, there's an hour for everybody right throughout the year groups.
Okay.
Do you want, should I come back? Shall I finish the questionnaire and then we'll come back to that?
Yeah, I think so.
In terms of the capita, we asked a question about budget and how much percentage per capita RBE is receiving or RE is receiving. Most people, it's as and when type budgets, so if there are resources that need to be purchased, it comes across for that purpose. There isn't a specific budget that's allocated, especially in the new world for humanities, as opposed to a specific subject or AOLEs rather than subjects. Money is divided across AOLEs rather than specific areas. So these are the percentage. 30% said they didn't know. 17% said they didn't think it was a relevant question. Schools that don't receive anything was 25%, but I think it's as and when, if there was some training that was required, they would send their teachers on training, and if it costed, then that would come out of some sort of training budget. Same as other humanities subjects, we've got one person saying that, same as others, again, yeah, somebody that responded that way. The money is as and required, that was an answer. We unfortunately, the way that we asked people to respond to this was by writing a brief note rather than ticking a box. And so these were their responses summarised. 2 schools said they had 10% of their budget was allocated to RBE. Less than other subjects, 2 said that they didn't feel that RBE was comparable with the others. And then 2 said it was for an AOLE based thing rather than a subject-based allocation of the funding. What percentage of teaching is provided by specialists? We only had 3 respondents for secondary schools. 2 of the schools said that 50% of their teachers are specialists, and for another school, they said all of their teachers are specialists. Again, I've been having conversation with lots of RBE specialists over the last year. This has been an issue for the whole of my educational career as an RBE teacher. I've taught in lots of schools and over 20 odd years, and RBE would have been the subject that was taught by lots and lots of non-specialists at various points, from year 7 to year 11. And I think there are very few specialists. If you think about primary school educator, there are specialists in all of the areas that they're teaching. So again, it's not really a relevant question for primary schools. Does RBE provision in school cover the requirements of the agreed syllabus and the RBE guidance? Overwhelmingly, 25 or 62% of them said yes, they're meeting the requirements of the RBE guidance. 10 of them said that they're moving, so 25% said they're working towards, and we're sort of early days in the curriculum, so you would expect that. 10% said that they don't feel that they're meeting the requirements of the RBE guidance, and 1 said that they just didn't know. Our teachers offered appropriate professional learning to support their RBE. 65% said yes, 15% said no, and 15% they said they would like more training. And then 1 school said they weren't sure, and 1 didn't provide an answer. So, I mean, yes, I think schools would like more training, but there was a positive response to say that there was material coming out to support training in this area. And that's the presentation. So if I go back to that one, we want to sort of look at that one in a bit more detail.
Yeah, well, it raises some pretty important questions at Key Stage 4, isn't it, in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like, it's been a lot to take in at one go, Phil. I'll come back to that in terms of how we apply this feedback and do something about it. But staying with this particular aspect of time allocation, I'd like to invite comments. I know, Hugh, this is something you've been particularly keen to keep an eye on as well. Yeah, I can't see. I can't see. Who's got hands up? Yeah. So, any thoughts? No.
The problem I had at one time was finding what was humanities and what was RVE, and part of the humanities can be said to be RVE as well. So deciding which was a real problem there, because as you said, Phil, some of these are integrated into activities as well. But what is included in that hour, is it purely RVE, or is it through humanities and the history of Wales and so on?
Yeah, I couldn't answer that one. I think in terms of the numbers, so in terms of 4 hours to do a humanities, I think that's quite a lot of time. And in terms of sufficient time to put in some good quality RVE, that would just, you know, if you're assuming the positive, that there's plenty of time for that to be to make a good job of religion, values, and ethics. But whether they're doing that, I couldn't say, and we don't have a vehicle way of being able to monitor that.
In a way, we would. It's impossible, maybe, but really look at the content of the curriculum itself within a particular school or something, as an example, maybe. But I know that I am aware of the difficulties in deciding that, and also it depends how many groups, for instance, are needing an hour in year 7, with the lack of staffing in school at the moment, and cutting down and so on. So and the number of pupils in class, all sorts of problems have come up recently regarding this. But on the whole, it's, we have to look at this quite positively in a way, can't we? Haven't we, Phil?
Yes, yeah. I think it's good. There's a good time allocation for humanities. That talking with this isn't a school in our local authority, but geography was getting 2 hours, history was getting 2 hours a week, and then RVE was getting 1 hour a fortnight. So this isn't one of our schools. But in terms of the parity between ourselves, so religion, values, and ethics, and other humanities subjects, I feel that we've always had less than. That's a very generalized statement. But in my experience, where geography would have an hour and a half or maybe 3 lessons per fortnight, religion, values, and ethics, or RE, has often had 1 hour a week. And I think the perception is the content that we can cover in a religion, values, and ethics lesson or an RE lesson is less than the content that you need in a history or a geography lesson. I think that is quite widespread across secondary schools. So I suppose, like you say, 4 hours, it's quite, a good amount of time to provide for humanities. But I suppose one of the things that we could do moving forward is just invite schools to find out what they've done to divide those 4 hours up. What does that look like in practice? We've got this information now, and over the course of a couple of years, we can invite these schools in one term at a time, just to sort of let us know what they're doing for RVE in their curriculum.
Thank you. That's fine.
Okay. Well, there's been a lot to take in there, Phil, at one go, and we've taken a lot of trouble in gathering this information, and given the fact as well that, particularly in the secondary sector, a lot of the aspects of the questionnaire weren't dealt with. I personally feel that we need to go away and I'm just inviting comment here to reflect on this and look at it very closely, and to decide what issues might arise from it that would inform our management plan in terms of the kind of support that we could provide for teachers, and also for getting a better grip of the situation. So I don't know what other folk feel about that.
Sometimes, Roger, I know I'm sorry, I'm coming in again. I think we need, as a SACRI, also to report positively back to schools, saying maybe that, putting a good view on some of these responses as well now, and thanking them for their work on this, and that we will work together with them again as the curriculum grows and more knowledge comes through. especially with the assessment point of view, which at the moment is quite problematic in planning for staffing and so on for the future in up the curriculum in schools.
Yeah, we'll take that on board. I mean, the whole purpose of what we're doing is to be as supportive as possible in what is quite a complex situation. Tanya, how does this, have you any idea how this compares with, feedback from across the nation, basically, given your wider role previously?
I don't think, but as far as I know, there hasn't been anything comparable. I don't know whether you know, Phil, in other local authorities or consortia to do what you've done with this, because it's quite as you've described, a difficult process of getting schools to find time and so on to actually respond to the questionnaires. So I can't answer that question, but just to say to respond to what Hugh's just said, and the relationship between schools and SAC and SACRE, it's always good to keep that connection and that feedback going on and that communication, in my opinion. So they're constantly reminded about SAC, its work, and they're there for them to support them. So I think that's really positive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll see if there's anything for this. I'd like to propose that 2 or 3 of us just actually have a look at this question now, because I mean, it's really we've done a lot of work into producing these results and finding and really having a really clear look at the issues that we would like to pick up from it and to take forward into our planning and our relationships with the schools as well. So I'd like to propose that as a way forward. Do I have any support for that? Sam, thank you. Do you have a second then? No second there?
Yeah,
Thanks,
Abdul, Councillor Abdul.
Thanks, Abdul. Thank you. Okay. Well, that's a basic principle. Let's just say forward. Schools in favour? Councillors? Okay, and faith representatives. Okay. So I'd like to volunteers so actually we can put dates and liaise on this at a later point, but I'd like volunteers for people to look at that for myself. I'd like obviously to put myself forward and Phil. I think it would be entirely appropriate going forward as we're looking at forward planning for Sam, if you would join that group. But it'd be very useful in terms of having some teacher representative. Hayley, you would? That'd be really good. So we can get right. Anybody else like to join? No. Okay, so the 4 of us to take that, and Sally, if you could, we could liaise on that to get some dates with regard to that. Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Right. Well, thanks for all the work you've done on that, Phil, and getting out to the school. It's been great. Right, so very briefly on this one, SACRE newsletter, which I think has just virtually almost gone out, hasn't it?
It's just been hopped off the press. It's not gone out yet.
Right.
If I share my screen. Okay. So hopefully you can see the newsletter on your screen. I'll just very quickly go over the contents for this particular edition. It'll probably be going out early September rather than now. We were very keen in conversation around the last one to make sure that the training that is available is made known to schools. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, I don't know if you can individually zoom in on your own computer or whether I need to zoom in on this one. I don't know, but I will zoom in anyway.
Yeah.
The headings, is it zoomed in?
That's something like that.
Okay. So basically there is a welcome. I've put links to the other 2 editions and some information about what is in those editions. The last time that we published, we told schools about the hub training materials but they weren't actually available, so we couldn't put the links in. So I've done that now. The links, they're still very, very useful videos, and they're still working on a few more to support religion, values, and ethics. So at the bottom of the left column and the top of the right-hand column, there is information about the training materials that are out on Hub. I've re-emphasised the information around the right to withdraw, or the removal of the right to withdraw from religion, values, and ethics. Denbighshire have created a policy or some support material to help schools as they maybe have to broach this with parents who want to remove their children from religion, values, or from RE, but no longer count from religion, values, and ethics. So there's some useful advice for schools if they are in that particular position. And so what I've done is I've made that document available from the newsletter. And then we have some national professional learning materials that have been coming out over the last 3 years, really, from WARE, from CSC, from EAS, from the different regional consortia across Wales. And what I've done is I've put some links to where schools can access the training on things like progression. There's some mandatory aspects of religion, values, and ethics, and other aspects within the curriculum. Actually, they're highlighted there. So looking at the mandatory elements, looking at shared understanding of the continuum, things like planning and assessments and pedagogical approaches to humanities. So there is a video for each one of those, and there are slides as well. Both of those are bilingual. And then on the reverse side of the newsletter, I dedicated it to the CYSAG conference. So I'm sure Taylor will quite like this. What we've done is on the left-hand side, CYSAG published a little document to say what they offer for schools and for SACs. And I thought that was really useful. So schools can access the CYSAG website, but so can we. We can certainly access the training around the conference. And because we are a member SACRE, I didn't realise this, but actually there are a couple of SACREs across Wales that have not taken up their membership with WASACRE, which I think is unfortunate for the teachers that are in those local authorities. But as a member of the WASACRE, we can access the materials for the conference and then make those available to schools, which I think is really important for our schools to know about those and to be able to access them. So on the left-hand side, they some bullet points on what WASACRE offers and what WASACRE does. And then on the right-hand side, there's some information about the conference, some links to the conference website and the other materials that can be accessed there. So all of the keynote speeches from Graham Donaldson, from Lynn Neagle, and from Mary Stella, the Right Reverend Mary Stella, have been recorded and are available on the WASACRE website. And also then the online seminars. There are these training seminars. I did one looking at narrative within early years and for younger years, and using and developing empathy through that. But there are a number of those that are available, and there will be 4 more that will be published in the near future. And what I've done is there is almost a password to be able to access that. I didn't want to put the password directly on the newsletter, but if you can click, the newsletter will only go out to member schools in our local authority, obviously, and they can click on that and they'll get access details of how they can, what they will need to do. There are passwords on those, and the passwords that they can include when they're trying to get into seminars. And then what we'll do is we'll hopefully publish the next of the seminars once they're released. And that's really the newsletter. It's about professional learning. It's trying to get all of the professional learning that's available for schools into one place. And it just seemed that the WASACRE conference came around at the right time for us to be able to publicise that, and it keeps it within that professional learning thing. That's the newsletter.
Well, there's a lot of very helpful support available for teachers by this newsletter, Phil. I'm just wondering, given the fact that non-specialists might not be the people who would look at this very, as quickly as others, do you publicise this through the network as well?
Yeah, it can be, yes. And I'll publish it directly to the heads of departments.
That would be excellent if we could do that. Okay. Well, thanks indeed for that. Just any questions or thoughts on that from anybody? Okay. Right, well, we will move on. How do we collectively support collective?
We moved an item.
Oh, of course, that's right. Item 7. So thanks for reminding me as well. Okay, we can turn to item 14, which we've been brought forward at Hugh's request, which is about representation on Conwy Sacre. You might, first of all, I'll take the top one. We are going to take a fresh look at the Constitution. So we mentioned the POU as being something representation that could be added to that. We were very conscious that, sorry, Tanya, we know that you've been very busy. We asked you a couple of years ago if you could gather data with regard to attendance at within various faiths. And we've been hoping something would happen on that, but we do recognize that you've had massive national responsibilities in that time for this. So we thought we'd better move on this one. I've asked Abdul to actually look at the possibility of Muslim representation, and I think you've been talking to your own community on that one, haven't you, Abdul?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we had a conversation Thursday, didn't we? And then I did look on the agenda, and it just did say Muslim representation. I know we've been spoken about that in past as well. So I thought rather than putting cart before the horse, if this committee does decide and we agree to have a Muslim representation, then I will approach and I'm hopeful I'll get someone. But I think we need to adopt that first.
Right, so you want the authority of a formal request, really? Yeah.
I think that would be the right way forward, Chair. Rather than I go and ask someone and then we decide not to.
Yeah. We are aware that I noticed that Bangor, for instance, have now got Buddhist, Hindu, and Gwynedd, a Muslim representation, but we weren't aware of any focus for Hindu and Buddhist of any great numbers within our county. So which is why we focused on Muslim representation. Right, well, would you like to make a proposal, Abdul, that this happens? And I'll certainly second it.
I would second that if you propose, yes.
Okay, we'll go down that route then. Okay. Right, all those in favour of going down this particular route as we make this review, faith representatives, councillors, teachers. Right, well, that's unanimous. We'll follow that through now, and we'll take your feedback on that the next meeting then, Abdul.
Well, this Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Faith representative via Catene actually became a more difficult issue than I actually thought it would be. Llandudno Catene, which includes virtually all the churches, adopted it very quickly. I then went and actually spoke to Rose and Conwy Catene, who weren't very aware at all of the work of Sacre. So that was interesting in a sense, giving them, the churches, a real briefing of the kind of things that we are responsible for and are doing. They were quite enthusiastic and they are happy to go down that road as well. However, as I discovered, Conwy Catene hasn't functioned for many years. And I was very aware, therefore, that if we went down this Catene representation route, that Hugh in particular would actually not have a natural way forward other than us co-opting him. And I spoke with Hugh on this, and so Hugh, I'd like you to raise the issues now, how you propose that we take this forward before we come to any final decision on this.
Well, you know, we have been concerned regarding representation for many, many years now. And in a way, it reflects the health of the ministry and the Welsh chapels as well in the more rural areas at the moment. And I have got a particular procedure on behalf of the Presbyterian Church where I report back to a subgroup of the Presbyterian Church, and then to the presbytery itself. And the presbytery at the moment covers Conwy and Dyfrdwy area, from Llandudno to nearly Corwen and Bala, Llanuwchlyn, all the way there as well down the valley. And I provide a summary of the procedure, and then that is discussed also in the full presbytery if there are any issues coming up. So I really don't want any denomination to lack that avenue, really. Although I see the discussion with Gytun in Colwyn as something very, very positive. But most of us down the valley are not aware of Gytun. It's been quite quiet, Gytun, really, in Colwyn Bay at the moment. But if they work together and agree on things, all well and good. But the questions that arise for me now is the procedures that we actually use to get representation on Sacre. Once a denomination has vanished, more or less, and a new Sacre or new group is set up, how do people know that they should be represented? How does the denomination know that it should be represented? Is it done through invitation? Is it done through information? And most denominations have general secretaries in Wales as well, or even local dignitaries or representation in offices as well. Does anything from our Sacre go through to them, stating the importance of Sacre and that their views are represented in discussions and so on? So instead of going down a route therefore of closing down a denomination route, especially from the Welsh chapels, and going back to a Cytun view, I'd like to somehow to discuss those problems. How do we go about it, getting representation, rather than saying all the time, we don't have a representation? Is it our own procedures that are lacking to begin with? I have started asking questions: who's responsible for, the independent church and so on. I have got certain names, but I think it should go through a certain officers or something of these denominations as well. And if it comes to that, how do we know that other people are invited and know about Sacre as well? It is a difficulty somehow there in providing the importance, the message of importance of Sacre to people of every faith, really, here at the moment. So that's my general view of things, Roger, at the moment.
Okay, Hugh. Just to clarify on that, the Anglicans and the Roman Catholics would maintain denominational representation because they're the providers of education within the local authority. So this was about all the other denominations. And in terms of what you actually have within Cytuns, of course, are churches from right across the board, including, for instance, in your denomination within Llandudno, and that will be a natural route for representation of churches that are genuinely working together and are thriving. But I do take your point that in terms of, we haven't got a Baptist. We've never had a Methodist, which is amazing when considering their interest in education as well. We haven't got any of the independent churches represented. So I think that basically there is an important step here, which you're highlighting, is that, and I don't know who they are, that we actually find out who are responsible for making nominations for faith representation on Sacre within the individual denominations. I'm writing to them and saying that this is the route that we're intending to go down, and we'd like to take a view from them. Certainly, I used to represent the United Reformed and the English Presbyterians, and I never fed back at all. I sent a report off once a year to them. I was never asked questions about it. There was no interest. There was very little awareness. My own local church, in fact, didn't know a great deal about it unless I particularly raised it. And the Methodist Church, in fact, knew nothing at all about it when I talked to them in Catene as well. So in terms of getting proper church interest, and also, as I have been given through my local Catene now, an opportunity to share what we're doing and to take that back into the churches and to take feedback on them, which is what this is really all about, that we're actually representing the Christian church here, as opposed to any of the other faiths, I think is quite important. But I think you've made an important point here, which is about that there have been formal routes in the past for consultation, and we ought to make sure that we go down those routes before we take the next step forward. So we will do that, Hugh. If you're, I'd be grateful if you would do as you said you would do that on behalf of your own denomination, and I'll certainly try to put that into practice now with regard to the other ones as well, where we have vacancies at the moment.
Yeah, perhaps we should go first of all, through the general secretaries in Wales, or the Independents have a central office in Swansea.
Yeah. The difficulty there, Hugh, is of course that this is about local representation within the county.
Yes,
and
but they have that all the any complaints or whatever comes through locally then through the general secretaries in Wales, because there are local representatives, and the Independents have got a committee meeting every term really, in the north here, and that would go through them then to discuss this aspect.
Yeah, and that would presumably cover Gwynedd, Clwyd.
It would, yeah.
Right across the coast, yeah.
But we in any connection, we should stress that we lack representation in Conwy at the moment.
Yeah.
Who have you got?
Yeah.
And I think I've been on this for many years now. I never heard of that being done before in any way.
Clearly a new initiative. It's attempts to create dialogue, feedback, and awareness in the Christian community.
Yeah,
in the county.
But I like the idea of representation from Catene. But if any discussion would take place on any decision, they would have to agree on the decision there, wouldn't they? That we made. Whereas I can come up to the meeting now and say the Presbyterian Church disagrees with you.
Yeah.
Or any other church.
Yeah, and that would be one particular denomination. Yeah. Well, let's go down this route. Let's go down this route anyway, Hugh. And
thanks very much.
And get the feedback, which is the important point that you made to me as well. So we'll do that before we move on with this one. We are still waiting for primary head teacher representation. Julia Buckley-Jones obviously finished.
Yeah, and I thought that I've just been chasing the emails. I presume that so the incoming head teacher from that replaced Julia, she would have the position as the representative. I thought that she'd been told about it, but I'll chase that up. If not, we'll open it up to the primary heads and see if there was anybody that wants to put their names forward.
Yeah, Matthew actually mentioned that at the last meeting I went to. So, and he was hopeful. And he did mention the point, I think, that maybe that if they couldn't get a head teacher, that they could actually find an enthusiastic teacher to represent them on here, who could, like you, go into EIT, be invited back to their meetings to report as appropriate. So that's but we need to get that filled somehow very quickly. Okay, so that's a holding on that one with work to actually be done. We have agreed this in principle, but I was aware that Hugh hadn't been at the meeting when we agreed it in principle. So we'll take those next steps forward. Okay, we move on to item 8A, reminding everybody at this particular point that collective worship, in fact, is 50% of our legal remit with regard to the functioning of SACs and SACRAs. And we have, if you look in the management plan, in fact, you'll find section 4 of the management plan, which was sent out. There's a formal program for how to proceed with that. But before we did that, I was aware that this is quite a sensitive matter. I'd actually attended an Anglican meeting recently of representations, where they were thinking about the provision of materials appropriate for collective worship in schools. And they were very aware of this as a sensitive issues, even though they were faith schools. So I was talking to Larry about this in terms of the best way forward. And Larry, do you want, are you still with us? Yeah, yeah. Larry was suggesting that Phil actually tables this at EIT for discussion, and to take feedback from them in terms of with their knowledge on the ground of what's going on in the authority, and that Larry has actually said she would like to promote a working group by tabling the item at the strategic head teachers, so that we float this as an issue, and we really find out what the response would be within the schools. I'm well aware that this all came through the Thatcher Initiative many years ago. I was well aware even when I started my teaching in the 70s that there was lots of opposition within the teaching body to actually having collective worship. We had an assembly which had a sort of very, very formal form of worship, and many of the teachers were opposed to it, even at that particular point. And I'm sure that's an increasing secularization of our world in the UK. That was going to be even more so nowadays. So we wanted to make sure that we dealt with this sensitively while recognizing this was an important part of the requirement of Saxon Sacres. Larry, do you want to add anything on this one?
No, I have, Phil, I have put asked if it can go on the agenda of the next strategic groups, the primary and the secondary, and we'll do that via the usual route, the EIS. I mean, I think, Roger, you know, we can do these. These are operational matters for Phil and I to discuss. But yeah, just for this meeting, we're in support of that approach.
Right. Okay. So that's the first step within this, and we'll obviously come back to it at the next stage of our strategic plan. Okay. Well, one of the things, of course, that schools need, of course, is support in actually delivering collective worship, and particularly when it's aligned very much with the aims of our new national curriculum as well. So Phil, in his business, has started to develop this, and he's produced some fantastic stuff he's going to share with us in a second. But it was quite interesting that when I went to the primary heads teachers meeting, their strategic meeting, the chair, Matthew Jones, said, "Oh, I'm using it already. It's fantastic, you people. Do have a look at it." So it's very encouraging to hear that kind of feedback, even from the few schools who've already dipped their feet in the water, Phil. So we look forward to your presentation.
I'll share my screen and then I will explain. So in terms of the collective worship, I think the resources that I've created very much underpin or are a result of my understanding and philosophy of collective worship. And that would be applicable to all schools. So I felt that actually as this is a part of our remit as a SACRE, and it will be something that schools will be looking into and as part of the working group, I thought I'd put a presentation together around the requirements for collective worship. I am part of a professional body called the Association of RE Advisors and Inspectors, ARIAC. And this has been a bit of a hot topic recently. There was some training for us as advisors on this area. In light of what Roger was saying about the increased secularization of the UK, about some concerns around what collective worship does, the RVE, the right of withdrawal, has been removed from religion, values and ethics, but it is still very much there for collective worship because of particular views around what collective worship does within schools and the place it sort of takes. And so actually what I wanted to do was present some of the stuff that we discussed as a professional body, and then also outline some of the requirements. So can you see the presentation, collective worship? Right. There is quite a lot of material on the CYSAG website around the requirements for collective worship and some good advice on how it can be set up within schools. And so really I want to highlight for schools that they can access that material. It's on the CYSAG website under the publications section. It's bilingual, so it's in both languages, and it's really useful stuff. The stuff around group collective worship hasn't changed for many years. It hasn't changed as a result of the religion, values and ethics and humanities inclusion in the curriculum for Wales. Collective worship is still a separate element within a curriculum or within the school's duty, and so therefore nothing has changed hugely over the last probably 40 years around collective worship since the 1988 Act initiated it as a responsibility for schools and a statutory duty. It sort of survived the curriculum revision and the changes to legislation, and the legislation around collective worship is still exactly the same post 2022 as it was prior to 2022 for Wales. So that's really worth a look at, and I would highlight that for yourselves to go and read through, and also to signpost for schools. In terms of a synopsis on the legal requirements, we have the collective worship, the legal requirements were laid down in the 1988 Education Act, and we have a Welsh Office circular called 1096 that flushes that out in terms of what that might mean practically for schools. It's not legislation, but it sort of applies and is guidance on the legislation. You'll notice by the date 96, that's going back a long time, and it's referring to legislation that was developed in 1988. So, you know, we've been asking Welsh Government if they can revise this particular document, if we can have some more up-to-date guidance for schools on collective worship. But they've said, well, no, this is still the document that people can go to, but I would just, I would still emphasize that schools go to the documents on the CYSAG website for the guidance. Is really, really good. All schools in a maintained school, BC and BSO's voluntary controlled and voluntary aided schools, the schools must offer, and they call it a daily act of collective worship, and it's got its own acronym, DACU, and that should be each day. So a school has a responsibility to provide a daily act of collective worship, and it sounds odd, but they have to offer a daily act of collective worship each day, but that is to emphasize that DACU is a thing, daily act of collective worship, and it is a daily thing, obviously. There are two exceptions. Parents have the right to withdraw their children, and sixth form students may choose to sort of not attend if they so wish. Head teachers have the responsibility to secure the provision, and the governing body, the local authority, the trust must ensure that collective worship takes place in schools. The majority of acts of collective worship should be, and the phrase from Estin is wholly or mainly of a broadly Christian character. But we'll go into that in a bit more detail later. Collective worship should be appropriate to the ages, aptitudes, and family background of the pupils. The timing and organisation is flexible, but funnily enough, legally, it has to take place on a school premises. And ironically, you can't have a daily act of collective worship in a church. It would have to be on the school premises. That's the legal side of things. I think in practice, schools would still hold an assembly or an act of collective worship if they were visiting a church. But interestingly, that's one of the nuances of the legislation. The SACRE or SAC and SACRE may determine that it's not appropriate for schools to provide collective worship as a wholly or mainly broadly Christian character. Schools can apply for determination. So if there's a considerable number of other faiths represented in a school might say, well, actually, we think that the wholly broadly Christian isn't representative of our school body, and we think that we want likely to be of a Muslim nature or of a Hindu nature or a Hindu character, and so they can apply to us for determination with a reason why, and SACRE can offer that as a determination. We've never had one, I don't think, in my history of working with Conwy SACRE, and I don't think we've had one in the existence of Conwy SACRE. But schools can do that if they so wish. Schools cannot ask the SACRE to relieve them of the duty to provide collective worship wholesale. It would have to be a slightly different focus if they did want that. Now, the concerns around this, and this was brought up in part of my professional body, is that, and I'll read this, it says, concerns about collective worship have been expressed by parents and teachers Some worry that it promotes only Christian values and beliefs, and that other faiths and non-religious beliefs will not be recognised and celebrated. Others worry that pupils will not be asked to pretend to have a faith that is not their own, or say words that perform actions that are contrary to their religious beliefs. And so there is this concern that collective worship is labelling people or making people do something against their will, almost like a pseudo-religious experience within a state-funded school system. The law's never provided a precise definition of collective worship, but it is considered as an educational experience. And actually that works in the favour of a school in providing an active collective worship, because the definition is quite loose. Actually, how they sort of decide on what they're going to create as a collective worship experience, as an educational experience, can be down to that conversation. And I think it's important to think of it is in why are we doing our collective worship? What's the purpose of it within our school? What are we trying to promote? Collective worship is not the same as corporate worship, because a community school is not a faith community, and a community school includes pupils and staff with different faith backgrounds or of no particular faith background at all. Collective worship is not the same as an assembly. There's no right for a withdrawal from assembly, but you can remove a child from collective worship. An assembly can be, so collective worship, what we say is, might take place in the school assembly, and it might be something that's got a reflective aspect to it. It might have a bit of reverence around that. But if you then move through to telling the school's notices, that wouldn't be part of the collective worship, but it might still be part of the school assembly experience. And to sort of separate the two somehow, maybe through, I don't know, just the sense of occasion that the active collective worship might draw in, as opposed to the functionality of the other parts of the assembly. Collective worship should be provided in accordance with the law to the benefit of the whole school community. And so there has been times where schools are removing children from acts of collective worship to do extra catch-up reading. They've not been withdrawn from collective worship, but the schools decided that they want to remove the child to do some extra catch-up curriculum stuff. And the question that I ask then is, what value does that place on the child as part of their community? If you're removing a child from a community event to do extra reading, what does that say about their value within the wider community? Roger asked me to come up with a working definition then for collective worship. And as we already said, that collective worship isn't defined by law, and therefore schools can use that to their benefit when they're creating these acts and what that might mean for their own school. But I thought this would be helpful, and this is in my conversations with schools, this is how I approach the conversation. So the word collective is done by people acting as a group, so it's the collective element, or done or shared by every member of the group. And I think that's where deciding what you want as a community, and deciding what your values are as a community, and deciding what you want as a body of children and staff is really, really important. And that's the collective element of the collective worship. And then worship, there is a sort of a divine nature to this that you sort of see in a definition. But the word worship is to ascribe the importance towards something, to venerate, or to consider something of worth. An old sort of Anglo-Saxon word that this comes from suggests, do I think it's worth it? Do I worship something that I think is worth it? Do I venerate? Do I place importance towards something? And I think that's really, really useful when it comes to defining what collective worship is in a school. Yes, there has to be the whole broadly Christian element, but what is it about a school community that we think is worth it? And so when I bring in the term together, when you bring collective and worship together, it becomes a bit of a hotbed topic. We don't want worship in schools. We don't want people to be made to worship in a religious sense. And I understand that as a parent. I don't want sort of a faith being imposed on my children. But at the same time, collective worship is not religious worship as I would teach it in a school. And a friend of mine, an RE advisor from the West Midlands, he sort of uses this illustration. He says, if you take a horse and you imagine what a horse is, you know what that is. But if you put another word in front of it, it changes the meaning completely. So a horse is a four-legged sort of creature with a bit of a free will that can run around, etc. But as soon as you put Trojan in front of the word horse, the phrase means something completely different. And if you take the word soldier, it means something and it's quite aggressive. And I don't want my child playing soldiers for X, Y, and Z. But toy soldier is something completely different to the meaning of the word soldier. So actually, collective worship comes together as a phrase. It's a package. It's not worship, it's collective worship. And so therefore, it means something different to the response that some people might have if I was to say, I'm going to be making your child worship today. Well, no, collective worship is something slightly different. And I like that nuance and that description. As soon as you add the word collective, it changes the meaning of the word worship. So I think this is a working definition, and we can discuss this as a group, but it's a time for the school body as a whole or in smaller groups to meet and reflect on the values that the school considers important. Many of these values will be based, but not exclusively, on the Christian tradition. And I think that works well because actually a lot of the values that have come from the Christian tradition, like forgiveness and kindness and persistence, etc., they come from quite a weighty body of knowledge and a weighty body of tradition, but it's not exclusive for the Christian tradition, and these are the things that the schools will probably continue and to develop. So I think that works well. And to help with this, I think you can hear my voice is straining a little bit. But if you think about the difference between these things, I want to sort of look at the difference between a belief, a practice, maybe a body of knowledge, and then values, because it's the values that I think we can promote within collective worship. And I want to use something that would be considered as maybe an act of worship. So we'll take Ramadan and fasting as an act of worship that people would be, that I would teach as a religion, values and ethics sort of bit of knowledge. In terms of the belief around Ramadan, Ramadan would be a response to almost like an existential question. You know, how do I get to God? How do I please God? What do I do? What do I need to do as a response to my relationship with this divine being? And so Ramadan is a belief that I will be doing something that will have an eternal consequence, or that I will have an existential sort of is a response. In terms of the practice, it's doing something, it's fasting, it's going without food. Now, I'm thinking this in terms of collective worship. Would that be prayer? You know, are we asking children to pray? Is that an act of worship in the same way that a religious worship would be defined? And so therefore there are questions around that and some responses that schools may say, well, we're not going to offer a prayer. We might offer a reflection, but we might not offer a prayer, but we might, and we're definitely not going to be asking people to believe that by doing something, they are getting a response from the divine. Knowledge. Ramadan is about the night of power. It's about the Quran being given. It's the month-long fast. And actually, there's a body of knowledge that might be provided in a collective, in an act of collective worship, you know, as a bit of information around what is happening around that practice, around that belief. But this is the bit that I think is really, really important. As I present a Bible story, or as I present a body of knowledge around something, it's the values that I'm hoping that children will capture. It's the values that I'm hoping the school will promote. So if I had an assembly and I said it's Ramadan, lots of people in Wales will currently be celebrating Ramadan. It's a way for them to connect with Allah. It will take the practice of fasting and going without food. It emphasizes a belief around the night of power when Muhammad with the Quran and subsequently those meetings with Angel Gabriel as he receives the Quran. But within the fast itself, there is this element of perseverance. It's a difficult thing to do. Charity, you're thinking about people who are going without. It will help me to understand about my community. It helps me to understand about heritage and the importance that story has in a community. And I think that's the bit that's really, really important. So we can talk about the beliefs, the practices, and the knowledge, the knowledge around an act of worship, but actually it's the value that we're hoping to keep. It's the value of kindness. It's the value of friendship. It's the value of persistence. That's the thing that needs to live on within a school, and it can be the reflection once something has been presented. Collective worship, adds value to the education process, providing opportunity for pupils too. And they sort of discuss the morality. They look at the values and ethos of the school. They gather, because it's a special time for the school to gather, and they are considered as part of that community. And they're promoting SMSC, spiritual, moral, social, cultural development. Is to look at their own beliefs and values, to ask them to reflect on what they think and what they consider. And then an opportunity to sit quietly and reflect on their beliefs. And again, lots of schools might have a school prayer, and they're saying, well, actually, we don't want you to say, they might remove the prayer completely and bring in a reflection instead, and just say, as we've sort of thought about whatever we've done, let's reflect on what that might mean to you. Other schools have said, actually, if we are going to pray, please don't say amen unless you agree with that. Don't put your hands together if you don't want to partake in the prayer. That's considered that there's conversation around whether that's good practice or bad practice or where that might be going. And I get that, but at the moment, there's no reason why a school shouldn't do that. But actually, it's just to sort of have a conversation with your school body on what you think would be acceptable and what wouldn't be acceptable, and working from that basis. Good collective worship is inclusive, it's involving of staff and pupils, it's interesting, it's inspiring, it's informative. And then there are a set of useful links that schools can use. Because I'm going to go on to my resources now, and I'll very, very quickly say that my resources are based on those things. I try to make them inclusive. I try to ensure that pupils are involved, the staff are involved, that they're interesting, that they're definitely inspiring and informative, that they really focus around the values, community-based values and individual-based values. And that's the emphasis of it. It's not about a religious experience. It's about the story. It's about the value that can be drawn out of maybe a religious story or a cultural story. So I have two products that I currently sell. One is an infant resource for years, nursery reception years 1 and 2. And the second one is for a junior, so years 3, 4, 5, and 6. They're aimed very much at the community school. So I have a lot of church schools that use the resource, but they're really, the name was originally that we came up with was simply collective worship. And that was so that a state school could meet their statutory requirements for collective worship in a very simple way. And these would be resources that would take something like a Bible story or a cultural festival and apply the values very much into a school or a child's experience. The infant resource, we have 4 lots of 39 weeks worth of themes. So a school year is around 39 weeks. And there is a theme for each one of those weeks. And then I have a story or a reflection. And then on the Tuesday to Friday, what we call active reflections. And so I've been working with a pediatric physiotherapist, I forgot what they're called now, but an academic from Lancaster University on how to develop emotional awareness through story. And there's very much an opportunity through collective worship to tell a story and then to recreate and play with the emotions in that story as we encourage children to be aware of how they feel and what they think. And so there's a whole set of resources behind those stories. You see the faces on the bottom left-hand side. What does happiness look like from my forehead to my chin, from my forehead to my feet? And there are very much age-appropriate resources to help take a story and to apply it in a child's sort of emotional context. And then the Key Stage 2 resource, the junior resource, again, there's 4 of these resources which can be repeated, and they take 39 themes for each week. And again, there's lots of cultural resources. Sorry. Each year, sorry. Yeah, there's 4 years worth of resources, 39 themes for each year. And then on the website, I've got a calendar that links cultural days So lots of information that's around on the internet. So all of the major world faiths are represented. All of the major world faiths festivals are also represented on there. So there are YouTube links. They're not my videos. They're videos from around the internet. And you can see there that there's a Muslim festival that's being represented and a Buddhist Dharma Day. On the website, you can find out all the information regarding the resources, and there's some sample resources as well. At the moment, we're only in primary schools, in infants and junior schools. I would love to have the time to write for secondaries, and hopefully once these are completed, I will be looking at that as well. But again, they're based on the things that I mentioned earlier. It's not worship in a religious sense. It's collective worship and ensuring people develop those collective values for the school. I think that's my presentation over. Yeah, there we are.
You want to mention the puppets that keep appearing on each page?
Okay, yeah. So with the infant resource, we've got these 4 characters. These 4 characters help children to explore 8 base emotions. I won't go into the theory because it's fascinating. There is a video, Tanya. There is a video on the WASAC website because I talk about this in much more detail about developing emotion through story. So if you want to visit that, I'll make sure that Sally sends out details about being able to access that. But these 4 characters, we commissioned a one-way puppets. They're a company in the UK that create the best quality puppets to help children explore their own emotions, to reenact story. And so those are the 4 characters there. You can find out more details on the website about it.
Right. Well, wow. We're back on, yeah. Get your voice back, Phil. Yeah. But well, there are 2 aspects to that, really. One, when you open the whole area of what is collective worship, I don't know what, I'll invite people to feedback on that, but I personally found that really, really helpful. Yeah. And I think actually in taking that to the next stage, sharing with, opening this up with secondary heads, that would be a really, really good vehicle. And then, of course, the second aspect is all this fantastic material, particularly based on themes and values as well, that Phil has actually produced, which are available for for schools to actually purchase and so forth. But I thought it was incredibly impressive, and the amounts of work that's gone into that must have been enormous, Phil. I can't begin to conceive of it. But anyway, any thoughts or questions from Phil's presentation?
Can I come in here, Roger?
Yeah.
And thank Phil for all that wonderful work being done. I'm going back in history, in my own history in many ways now. I've sat in many meetings at the beginning of schools in the mornings and so on as a nesting inspector at that time, and saw the values and saw all sorts of stories and so on. And I had to wait at that time for any aspects of spiritualism or spiritual development and so on. And it usually depended on a prayer or something at the end. And I could then tick a box saying that there was a certain spirituality in collective worship. I noticed that spiritual development comes at the end of your presentation in the words there. It doesn't come at the beginning in any way. And I wanted to ask, how does this actually fit in? And is there any, coming from the Christian tradition and other traditions as well, is there a discussion on prayer itself here and the effect of prayer and supporting the health of an individual, perhaps through prayer and so on, and the changes in feelings and so on that come through these various things? Or does it, and then the connection between the big questions and questions that cannot be answered easily through the curriculum itself? It sounds, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I'd like some reflection on that if possible.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the spiritual aspect for the curriculum, in the RVE guidance and in Conwy agreed syllabus, we have a section on spirituality and developing spirituality within schools. And I think it's a very good framework for developing spirituality. I think we could do some separate training on that, but collective worship definitely delivers part of that aspect. But basically, there is I call it an up, down, in and out effect for spiritual development. So inwards would be my spirituality. How do I support myself, my own well-being, my own thought life? I think inward spirituality would make sense. Outward spirituality would be my relationships with other people and how that would have an impact on, again, sort of well-being and my spiritual outward-looking relationships. You've got your relationships to the things around you, the planet. So pointing down, you've got sort of spirituality towards I suppose, the earth and creation and the things that are around me and looking after them well. And then you've got the up arrow. And the up arrow is a bit of a contentious arrow because for some, it would be deity, it would be connection with something bigger and wholly other. Yeah. For others, it would be, well, actually, there isn't anything. So the up one gets stunted, but actually it's still asking those questions about what happens when we die, what happens to, where did we come from? There is sort of those still existential questions, but they may not have a religious answer. They may have a more secular, non-religious based approach. But they're still valid questions. And I would suggest that a good collective worship scheme would ask all of those questions. They would look inwards, they would look outwards to relationships, they would look down towards the relationship with the earth, and then they would look up and ask those big questions about where do we come from, why are we here, and actually respond with the different people's responses to those particular questions. In terms of prayer, at the moment, I think schools are in their right to say, yeah, we can pray, but give that caveat to say, if you don't want to pray, you can opt out. But I know that schools are just removing prayer completely because of that particular concern with parents, and then more reflection. So what I've done with my collective worship resources is that when I wrote my original prayers, none of them ascribed an activity to God. So I tried not to say, help us to be good friends, because that's attributing a request to a deity that I may not believe in, or a child might not believe in. But I could say, let's think about how I can help my neighbor, or how can I help the person that's sitting next to me. And sort of, you're getting the child to reflect on a similar thing, God help us to be nice to our neighbor. Well, actually, I can ask the child, how can you be nice to your neighbor? And there's a direct response then requested by the child to think about what they need to do to be. So I started to remove like a request of a deity to do something in response of, let's think about how we can be nice to our neighbor. Let's think about what we can learn from the parable of the Good Samaritan, and how can we be good Samaritans to the people around us. That's very different to saying, dear God, help us to be a good Samaritan. But the reflection is asking the child to think about that. And that's where I think the spirituality would be developed. And also when it comes to considering big questions, like where do we go when we die? If that's sort of different people's responses to those would be X, Y, and Z, the reflection might be, let's think about how we, I don't know, where we would think about where we would be on that particular spectrum, rather than saying, God, when I die, I hope that I'm in heaven, that would be very inappropriate within the school setting. But I think within prayer, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next sort of 5 years or so. There are some organizations that are really trying to outlaw prayer within school, to say, well, actually, it was almost like a spiritual, if you're making somebody pray, that it would be against their human rights, and it would be against their choice to be able to decide what they want. And I can see that perspective, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in schools, and if there are any if there's any comeback on schools as they're asking children to pray, or if they're asking children that there will be a prayer, but they can opt in or opt out of, because that has its concerns as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Phil's just outlined there some of the sensitivities that we really are aware of with regard to this issue. And you obviously raised one of the key ones there, Hugh. But personally, I'll just invite any quick thoughts on this one. You know, I thought the approach going out into our schools to actually get them actively engaged in this whole process of worship and having a definition that they could potentially work to as well was really, really helpful. And certainly one or two heads I've spoken to, only two, I've found it really, really useful. But thoughts before we move on, I'm going to ask you whether you would like to endorse this approach from SACRE as a formal proposal, and Phil can go out with that confidence then when he actually speaks to heads and shares.
May I just add something very briefly?
No. Yes, go on. Nicholas?
I'm particularly thrilled with this section of our SACRE meeting. I've been waiting for it for a very, very long time. There is just two very small aspects that concern me. One is that when they get to the sixth form, the students could opt out of collective worship. That may have arisen because collective worship wasn't very well thought through, but I do know from experience that the sixth form age is one where, quite rightly, the pupils are feeling they need to be more independent. And I can see there is one way around this, and that is very carefully to involve them in minor ways, perhaps, but part of leading collective worship. And if that is not done, there's a tendency for these students to form groups which are not helpful at all when they're out of touch with the encouragement of Christian worship. Thank you.
Response to that.
Yeah,
just briefly.
Well, no, I think that's a really good idea, and I think sort of pupils being involved in. I think it needs that conversation about what does a school want from its active collective worship, to think about its values and also that wider aspect around mental health and spiritual development, and then actually put a program together as a result of that as your aim, rather than to tick Hugh's box, and that is, oh, we've said a prayer, so therefore Eston will be happy. And actually, it's part of a much bigger picture. And I think you're right, that if you carefully think about collective worship and also incorporate the views of all the stakeholders, especially the pupils involved, then you can tailor something that will, you know, reflect the nature of the community around them. They will look at issues around mental health and almost, because there is that spiritual connection for mental health. I would have thought about connecting with the wider world, with green spaces, with going outdoors, with looking at good mental health aspects. These things can be brought out in an active collective worship, and asking children or sort of young adults in sixth form to reflect on those and to sort of consider what they think. So yeah, I think if we can almost do a good PR thing for collective worship and make it something that is useful for our learners and for our staff, then it will be looked on less with suspicion and more on as a helpful aspect within the school curriculum and life.
Yeah, because the profile of this as an issue needs raising, and this is one way of actually doing it. Just before we move on,
there's a few people with hands up, Roger.
Right. Oh, sorry, Abdul.
Abdul and Sam as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. It's just, it's very interesting about the books published by Phil, and I can relate to that. I've always been, I've been to different funeral and different things, and I do my own prayer. And I always give examples. Say, for instance, we have a office in London where all the councillors go in when we have a full council meeting, for instance, as the staff. So I know I go from Colin Bay, and Sally comes from Clandrews, Angie comes from Clandino, Jacobs from Clannafagan, but we know our destination is London. So the same way as a believer, we believe in different way, but the ones who believe in God, we know there is a God that existed, but we have a different way of believing. As long as we believe in oneness of God and the creators, my belief is that's all we need, and that's how Phil really cleverly put that together, and it's in simple English for people to understand. So yes, I'm quite impressed. I'm sure Phil been working very hard, and I would like to propose that we do endorse Phil's article.
Yeah, we'll take that. So thank you for that, Abdul. We'll take that proposal on the table at the moment. Sam.
Just really quickly just to thank Phil for this excellent work. One of the things that I think is really strong about this, which shouldn't go underestimated, is the support that we can give schools in terms of medium and long-term planning of collective worship. I think grabbing something off SBCK assemblies 10 minutes before we're due to do an assembly, or simply just some reacting to problems within the school, especially in secondary schools, some children being caught vaping. Right, I'll do an assembly on the dangers of vaping on Friday. Probably happens a lot more than Estin is aware of, and than perhaps many would like to care to admit. So a more strategic sort of medium long-term plan of collective worship, I think a lot of schools would really value and benefit. So thank you.
Yeah. And in endorsing this, I just want to emphasize as well that the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church might very well have a different approach within their own schools to this whole issue. But that's taken for granted, Claire, as we move forward on this. Yeah. Hayley, what I would just before we make a decision on this, I'd be interested in your response to this primary material, and what have you used it, or what are your first impressions?
Firstly, apologies for the background noise. They're all in the toilets and it's right next to where I am. But we've used the 7 to 11, which of course we were a 3 to 7 school, but we were dabbling in Phil Lord's documents prior, but now he's brought out that early years one. I'm really excited about it. I think it's an excellent resource. He's really focusing on the values aspect and the time for reflection. So I think it's really exciting. I think it's important now we reach out to schools and make sure we're sharing it. Out of curiosity, are we sending this guidance to heads?
It has to be by open invitation. And I think basically what Laura is plotting at the moment, and I don't mean gunpowder plotting, I mean planning really, is an opening up of this area for discussion with the various head teacher groups. And having done that, and that's why I thought Phil's introduction to us today was particularly useful as an opening out of the whole issue. And then there will be follow-up to say, well, this has been provided already within our authority. And some of the schools, of course, as I said, the chair was saying, I've already adopted it and it's working terrifically well. But we have to, because of the sensitivity of the issue, go down this very, very gradually. And we decided today what that strategic sort of first step would be through Lowry. But I think it's quite important that we now, as a SACRE, would endorse very much this approach that Phil has actually taken us through, both the approach and the material.
Can I just say, the only reason I'm mentioning the resources is because I've been asked to mention the resources. I feel really awkward in this. Because of the sort of the business side of this. But I wrote the resources because of my understanding of collective worship and wanting to make that something that schools could make accessible without blurring the lines between corporate worship and collective worship. That was one of my key drivers. for schools to explore values and using various stories to be able to do that. But I do feel very awkward sort of promoting that within this particular forum, but I've been asked to do that. And so that's why I've asked, it's not going to be a local authority adopted resource that it's a business venture in the same way that Jigsaw RE or other organizations exist. They can promote, they can provide a presentation of the
I'm going to cut across you there, Phil, because of the time. I'll take responsibility for that, because it was my idea that we actually, having seen this material and spoken to a couple of people who've used it, I really wanted to take it forward as an excellent piece of material. And strategic, I mean, I come from, as an ex-head, from the position that Sam was mentioning, to have this kind of strategic approach as well, I think will be of enormous value. So anyway, I'm just actually asking that we would both formally endorse, sorry, A, the approach, which includes the definition, and B, the material that in fact Phil is presenting for schools to actually look at some point in the future. Right, those in favour, faith representatives, unanimous, councillors, unanimous, and teachers. So that's completely unanimous. And thank you again. Enormous amounts of work that's gone on this. So I think we are very privileged to have someone with your insight and skills working with us. That's really appreciated. I'm conscious now that that's taken a lot of time. I think it's been well worthwhile. It's something, as Nicholas said, we've not discussed in all the time I've actually been on SACRE, and yet it's 50% of our remit. So I'm going to push through very quickly through the rest of the agenda. So please bear with me while I actually do that. Item 9, progress on the teacher network. What's the progress on that? And that's in section 9 of our management plan.
So it's established we have members from each of the clusters now on the teacher network. We weren't able to meet, or we've not been able to meet in the summer term, but what I've done is I've pre-published the 3 dates for next academic year. So the dates for the autumn, spring and summer have already been published. So I think we'll be able to sort of jump on that now. Everybody will have that in their diaries. It was difficult to try and get people together because agendas went out last minute, as did the dates, and that's my fault. But I've rectified that by putting a year's worth of material in the diary.
That'd be really, really helpful. And okay, providing a framework of support for less experienced teachers. We've already referred to the development of the Bangor initiative as well. That was resolution item 30 in the minutes. So
Bangor have put together, this is for secondary initially, but they are looking to create primary knowledge-based courses as well. But a couple of professors on the religion, values and ethics, religion and philosophy and ethics department, they have created some seminars to bring non-specialists information around Dharmic religions, Abrahamic religions, looking at all sorts of non-religious philosophical convictions. And so I've got dates for those already, so we'll publish that. That could be in the autumn and the spring term for next year.
How will we get that out to schools?
I'll use that through the newsletter for schools. It's at the moment it's only secondary, so I can do that through my own secondary network.
Right, okay. Right, thanks for that. Any questions on that? No, okay, we move on. The annual analysis of inspection reports, which you've provided us.
It's been tabled.
Which we've tabled that. Any questions on that, on that summary? No, okay. Right, we'll move on then. Right, the SACRE Strategic Management Plan. I hope you've had a look at that. What we've done within the latest copy that went out to you is that we've highlighted where we've got to in red on lots of the items within that plan. As I mentioned earlier, in view of that there'll be this handover taking place, we will in fact now table that as a major item in terms of our next meeting, in terms of reviewing all our progress on that, And I think it would be quite important as well, if Sam is taking over at some point in the future as well, that he will take ownership of that in his own way, and getting a grip with that will be really, really important. So
yeah, can I that's absolutely fine, Roger. I just want to, I'm very keen to be nominated, but we do have to go through democratic, you know, I think,
we do.
yeah,
I made that clear
lovely.
at the
Okay,
beginning of the meeting as well.
sure.
You would have to be.
And if anybody else wants to be nominated, that's absolutely fine by me. Yeah, yeah.
I have this strong memory sitting in a meeting completely unaware. Nobody had ever spoken to me previously. And Hugh said, "Oh, I'd like to nominate Roger Boone as my replacement." I hadn't even had time to think about it. So, but naturally, of course, we'll go down that through that process. It's appropriate. Governor Links. Are you with us? Are you still with us, Lowry? No. Okay. Well, I've had a meeting with.
Yes, I am, Roger, but I'm going to have to go shortly now. I've just got my next meeting. Do you want to just do this item quickly and then I'll leave you?
Yeah, yeah.
The governors.
Well, I shared with Lowry last week that I was really concerned that when we went with the consultation with schools, I did not get a single response from a chair of governors that I wrote to, and I wrote to every single one of them in the authority, and I didn't get one response. So there's an issue here. So we have this previous proposal for the religious education consultant and the head of education service to attend governor association meetings. That hasn't happened yet, but I think that needs to happen. There's an issue to do with governor training, and there's also a proposal that we made last time. This is also part of our constitutional changes, that there will be governor representation on SACRE. We've been fortunate in the past that Hugh happened to be the chair of the Governors Association, and he also happened to be a faith representative. That was purely accidental, but very fortuitous. So, Larry, I think you're suggesting that stage one is that Phil prepare an article on SACRE and the need to involve governing bodies for the latest governing body newsletter. I think that was one thing that you proposed. And the other was that you would follow up my letter to governors, that it would be sent out again with your endorsement, highlighting the fact that we really would like a response.
Yes, and I want to link Phil up with Einir Phil, who is our GSO, our Governor Support Association coordinator, and then Einir then can promote this via our governor newsletter and invite you to the next one, which is in the autumn term. But just by, well, means of reassuring you, Roger, we've got nearly 1,000 governors, and we held our association a fortnight ago and we only had 7. So it doesn't surprise me really in terms of the feedback to the request. Just to give you some context.
That's breathtaking. Bit of feedback there. Yeah, well, that explains everything almost. But let's go down this route. And if we can get a governor representative on here, then that's be quite key, in fact, to get that insight as well. So we've got those 3 proposals there. They've been previously agreed, but it's not a proposal. I think that's going to be an action. Yeah, that says the governor's newsletter, the governor representative, governor advisor. Was that what you called it? Yeah, that's right. Okay, and to develop some governor training and make a proposal to them. Okay. Any thoughts on that before you go, Larry? Is that it?
That's it. Thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you at the next SACRE. Thank you very much, and have a good summer to those of you who are in schools.
We hope you get some time to rest as well, Larry, in your busy life.
Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Phil. Hwyl. Ta-ra.
Thank you. Thank you. So we move on to item 15, WASACA. Feedback on the Wales Association of Standing Welsh SACREs National Conference. Colette, Nicholas, I, and Phil all attended that conference. Weren't you there, Carl? I thought I saw you. Oh, right. Okay.
Wasn't me. Must be a lookalike. I was meant to be there, but unfortunately I couldn't go.
Right. I thought that was an excellent conference, and I think Tanya had a big part in that. I don't know whether she's still with us. Right. But the disappointment, I mean, Professor Donaldson, we met for the first time and heard his philosophy, ideas, and reflections on the introduction, which I found really interesting and helpful. I was very disappointed that the new Minister of Education in Nigel had, although her predecessor was scheduled to speak to the conference, she decided she didn't want to come, and very quickly put together a speech to the conference, literally, that had to be done that morning, and we had to change the agenda around so we could hear from her. And I don't normally make these kind of comments in public, but I was really disappointed by the kind of blandness of the presentation, put it that way. But the conference itself and the seminars were excellent, really, really helpful. Nicholas, do you want to add anything on that?
I think I would like to reinforce or quite agree with what you said. It was delightful to hear Professor Donaldson at last. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas. Okay, so we received the minutes of the Spring Association on the 5th of March. We have to formally do that, don't we? Or do we note them? Sally,
Yeah,
do you note those?
it's just to note them, but we do normally propose and second and show of hands to note them for the minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, just a show of hands to note the minutes. Okay. Councillors, faith reps, teacher, thank you very much. And the last bit here is this, where is it? Where's my stuff on this? Follow up to that conference, there are two things, and I think, have we circulated this to everybody, Sally? Libby, the secretary, actually circulated links so that you could actually go and, if you hadn't been able to get to the conference, you could actually tap into the links, and you could also recording of some of the speeches, and they are available. Have they gone out to all our members, Sally?
I've forwarded quite a few things of late, but I'll go back and check, and if I haven't, I'll circulate it. Okay, that would be really, really helpful. I think people who weren't able to get there, like Colette, for instance, and some of the others of you, I'd appreciate that. And we have a number of these. WESC are offering a number of online seminars that they've already started, actually, and they're doing it in partnership with NAPFRE. And you can book those seminars if you want to actually attend online. Phil, I'm not aware of what the precise content of those seminars is. I hear.
No, I don't. I know the ones that have been presented because they're already up there. But no, I don't know the content. But I remember not off the top of my head. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm certainly going to access them through the link that's been sent to us. So, Sally, if you could get that link. I presume you were copied in from Libby Jones.
Yeah, I normally am, Roger. Yeah, I'll go back. I think I already have circulated it, but I will redo it.
Yeah, you put them, the two things we've just discussed together as a package, and that could go out. That would be great. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, we got through a lot of material today. I'm particularly pleased that we've had the collective worship sharing. And just thank you again for all your attendance and your contribution. And to, especially the teacher, Haley, to wish you a very restful and happy holiday. And we'll see you in the autumn. Take care. God bless. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Very gracious.